All right, we should be popping up live on the SMAC Talk page. SMAC Talk page.
Just testing.
I know.
There you are.
What's up, everybody? We are about to go live and record our podcast. Happy Friday. All right, we're going to share this beast out.
That's exactly what I just did.
We are live on Periscope now as well.
We are live and jet lagged on SMAC Talk.
No jet lag here. It's just you, buddy.
I think it was the 14 hours forward, 14 hours back, 15 hours forward, 15 hours back, and then, not even like 7 days and then going 8 hours, 7 hours forward again.
Yeah, I say it's because you went twice.
The second trip is what kind of killed me. So that's okay. I got a little time off from global travel. My next keynote's March 14th.
What's up, Ask a Millionaire? What's up, Sean? What's up, Scope Scribe? All right, we're doing a podcast recording of our podcast SMAC Talk. It's actually episode 72. Episode 72. We're pushing our way to towards episode 75.
Wowzers, and you've probably done about 75 of your FOMO fans now. 75.
Funny guy. Nope, I have done 18 episodes of FOMO fans. But yeah, thank you guys for sharing it out. This will be a fun topic, talking about securing customer data. Something that Daniel Newman just got back from Spain with talking about, which we'll let him talk about.
I'm ready when you are.
All right, 1 second. Just making sure we have the settings right on the podcast side. You guys are listening to the Shorty Awards nominated show that was with SAP and Ursula Ringham for SMAC Talk. Daniel, you might want to flip your hat. Well, you got like a shadow on your face for some reason. I mean, the people are going to be mad if they can't see that the beautiful human. All right, so let's do about 5 seconds quiet, and then we'll go live. Thanks, guys, for jumping in. Welcome back to another episode of SMAC Talk, social, mobile, analytics, and cloud. It is time for episode number 72. We're talking about who's responsible for securing customer data. My name is Brian Fanzo, better known as iSocialFans, joined by global, international, world traveler, digital transformation extraordinaire, and the man who finally got 3 stripes on his newborn son, who is now can match daddy, Mr. Daniel Newman. How is the jet lag? And we took a little time off from SMAC Talk, so how are you doing?
Buddy, I'm doing good. And yeah, I'm a little tired. Came off the plane yesterday from Madrid, but love Spain, love that city. Excited to go back there again in May. I'm doing pretty well though. And yeah, you really kind of spilled all my beans, I got the 3 stripes. I got the, I am a little bit jet lagged. I'm a little tired, and we did take a little bit of time off, and that's all my thunder, Brian. I got nothing else to say. So thanks everybody for attending this episode. No, I'm just kidding.
So tell me, what were you speaking about there in Spain?
So it was actually really fun because I spent so much time talking to tech, and like a couple of weeks before I was in Korea, I was talking to HP, and that tends to be the industry, right? Either big tech brands or big tech conferences. And this was an invitation to come speak at an event called HIP Expo, and HIP is Hospitality Innovation Planet.
Well, I mean, the guy with 3 stripes that used to be a DJ. I mean, every HIP conference is going to want you.
I am so hip. And I mean, what a better acronym than Hospitality Innovation Planet HIP conference. But it was basically 12,000 of my closest friends in the hospitality and restaurant industry. So they had some really, really cool discussions from like some of the world's leading chefs and consultants in the hotel industry, travel industry. The exhibit was awesome because it was beer and food. And so you were walking around and,
nice.
And people were, free samples of wine, beer, all kinds of great meat, and in Spain they eat meat and bread all the time. And I'm kind of a meathead.
Our audience should know we did our first international travel together, actually, to Spain. We were a little different area, right?
Yeah. Our first time doing SMAC Talk live globally was in Barcelona, Spain, where we also consumed a lot of pan y jamon. That's ham and bread, in case you can't translate that quickly.
And for everyone that knows, I'm a picky eater, and their breakfast is lunch meat, which I'm sure, like I say there, it's like everywhere in the world except for U.S. But I'm not a lunch meat eater. That's a whole different world over there.
Yeah, so if that's not your jam, then you're definitely not good. They don't have Chipotle in the morning. But it was actually pretty funny, Brian, because they eat a fairly small amount of food at breakfast. They love their coffee and they love to sit. So they start their days late. You can go to breakfast at 9 or 10 in the morning, and you can have there can be cafes are packed with people because they just start slow. And then they also do like 2-hour lunches in the middle of the day. Yes. The culture is actually really great.
Remember, we did a bet. We couldn't find food a couple of times because we were eating on the wrong o'clock over there when we were there.
Yeah. So but we could find food at midnight in the middle of downtown Barcelona, and you could get a meal, and it was crowded. But it's funny because they don't eat a big meal, and they eat breakfast really late. But I get down there early, and they've got all the meats out and the breads out, and I grab like one piece of bread, but then I found the eggs. So they have like poached eggs, like they look like hard boiled or not hard boiled, fried eggs, but they're not fried, they're poached. And they put them in a little tray, and they put like 5 of them in there for the whole hotel. Oh, wow. And because not a lot of people eat a lot of breakfast, and so I grab all 5 eggs, put them on my plate. Ruin it for everybody else. And then they've got like a stacked tray of meat. Like they got the Iberica ham, and then like regular ham, and then like some sort of turkey, and then bacon. And I just have a plate, and it looks like a mountain of meat. And
everybody that walked by said, American.
Yeah, I'm sitting there, and I'm looked like the absolute American beefcake. I mean, just a pile of meat on my plate, probably 3 inches tall, stacked up with all the eggs. I'm sliding the bread around the plate, putting the bread and the egg and the meat on it, looking like such a beefcake. And, they're all sipping their dainty espresso, and they get like a piece of bread and 1 slice of ham, and they put it in the middle. So that's just culture. I can definitely embrace. I ate some really good local flair, but in the morning I like to get started and pig out. But anyway, a little side story for everybody.
I like it. We got to catch people up on where we were at.
A little Dan Newman eating.
For our audience listening on the podcast side, we do record these every week via Facebook Live as well as Periscope. So if you want to watch it live, I actually had a couple people ping me over the last week, and they're like, hey, I want to watch these guys live for the podcast for Smack Talk. If you just do facebook.com/Smack Talk Live. And I see our good friend, previous guest of our show, Tim Crawford, is in there watching on Facebook Live, and he is a CIO advisor. I'm guessing this topic, of course, is going to be one that he will have a lot to say on as well. So feel free to drop your comments. Those watching on Periscope, I see Brad and Nelcha and some people out there on Periscope watching as well. But anytime we can talk about security, I'm always usually game for that, as I worked in that space for a long time, and I like to keep those chops kind of a little bit fresh and make sure we kind of cover those things. And Daniel, it's something you write a lot about, and you've been doing a lot about from with the brands that you work with. And set the stage here on this idea of securing customer data. We always say that the constant theme of this show through 71 episodes, now 72, is that we talk about data in every episode. But talk about where this came from, what your thoughts were, what was the discussion in Spain, and then I think we'll get into the topic itself.
Yeah, as well as I got off track thinking about jamon, y queso, y pan.
Yeah, for everyone that looked at their phone and thought, like, I wasn't listening to a food podcast.
Yeah, you are. The world revolves around food.
We talk Chipotle and Dunkin'. I'm happy.
Food and sex motivates everything. But the kind of what was interesting was, like I said, I spent so much time talking to the tech industry, and this was the food industry and the hospitality industry, hotels, food, travel. And I wanted to deliver a unique presentation, and they wanted me to come and talk about the book and digital transformation, but I wanted to make sure it related to that. And one of the things that kind of occurred to me is, one is that the hospitality industry is the ultimate experience industry. So everything from, Disney to Virgin to Starbucks to all these companies have completely built their success community cultures around creating experiences that are low friction, highly memorable, and shareable. So that was kind of a start of it. But the second thing is in order to succeed at this, they've been huge collectors, aggregators, utilizers of data. They are one of the industries that is absolutely pulling so much information about their customers, keeping so much information. They're heavy e-commerce because people transact in the restaurants, they transact online, they transact in the hotel. That means their credit card information is being kept on file, is being utilized to book and reserve rooms, is being tied into many, many third-party systems that are being used to create and book. And what I said is that, ultimately, these companies have a massive responsibility because of the amount of data that they're collecting to secure that data. And I said, and it was interesting because not every restaurant is a global big company like the Chipotle or Starbucks, right? There was a lot of local restaurateurs or small chains there. Not every hotel is Hilton or Marriott. There's a lot of, local hoteliers or franchise hotels. And all this data that they're collecting, it kind of occurred to me. It wasn't like it just occurred to me, but it's occurred to me over time.
Everyone in the audience is picturing the light bulb going ding.
No, it was just like that these people don't see themselves as tech companies. They don't. And you and I we've had the podcast before that every company is a tech company today. Well, every company is absolutely a data company today. And any company that's trying to improve the personalization of marketing, deliver omni-channel, be more social, utilize social data and real-time customer data and stored customer data to deliver better results has a certain fiduciary duty to be responsible with that data. Meaning that now every company is a security company. And when I said that to the audience, you kind of saw everybody light up. And a lot of the people, like when we talked either during or after the presentation, you kind of asked them, security really is not a top of mind thing. And some of these places only have one or two people at all in an IT department. And even if they're outsourcing it all, most couldn't tell you how they were successfully securing the data. It was almost an assumption, which is such a massive risk today.
Wow. We can all agree that, an assumption in life, you make an ass out of you and me. That's all the jokes I will have for the day. But the fact you're making assumptions when it comes to user data in a world that right now there is zero trust of brands, zero trust of businesses, and even giving up your data for even the millennials, that the ones that are, I would say, a little bit more open to their sharing of data. The fact that millennials and these groups, even Gen Z, have been kind of screwed over or taken advantage of, or their data has been exposed in ways that they didn't think was ethical. Maybe that's right, maybe that's wrong, but as a whole, it's scary to think that they're making assumptions and not knowing how their data is being secured. And this was one that as we were talking about our pre-show, Daniel. When I worked for the Department of Defense, a lot of what we were doing was I was trying to get the different branches of the military to collaborate and share cybersecurity policies. I like to tell people, if you think your collaboration and your culture was different, try thinking about getting the Army to share with the Navy and do it with a cybersecurity policy. That's what my role was when I was there. But one of the things that was really interesting was as you open up the collaboration pipelines, you're now opening up data and tool data from different things like, hey, I'm sharing this from my CRM system. I'm sharing this from my employee system. I'm sharing this from my content management system. And this was a massive, hurdle that we had to get over. And that wasn't customer data. That was really just like user data internal, which I think is a little bit easier to manage. And the downfall is a little bit less because let's face it, anyone who doesn't realize it, when you signed your life away, going to full-time work at a enterprise job or a company, you pretty much sign your life away that says all of your data is property of your business and your business gets to decide what they're doing with it. But beyond that, I think when you're thinking about customer data, you also have to think of what tools does it sit on? How are you encrypting it? Where is it getting encrypted at? And then the other piece of this is what level of encryption do you want to implement? Because there is a little bit of a risk versus reward. You put too much security, too much encryption, the idea of leveraging data in real time almost goes away.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And another thing you have to think about too is what happens to customer confidence after a data breach occurs. And so
Target.
Yeah, there was actually, you think about Sony, you think about Target, think about Home Depot, Yahoo. But so this company, and I just pulled it up because I looked at this a while ago, a company called Semaphone, a UK-based fraud prevention, did a survey. And they talked to 2,000 respondents and said, what would your response be to doing business with a company who had credit card or debit card data stolen? And in a 2,000 person survey, 86% said they would either be unlikely or highly unlikely to ever do business again with a company where their customer data was. So, you think about that. If that data is reflective of your customer base, having credit card data stolen could actually put you out of business almost instantaneously. Now, we've seen a lot of these breaches are limited in terms of what data, because a lot of these bigger companies have encrypted some portions of the highly sensitive data. So they were able to get certain pieces of the data without getting all the data. But interestingly enough, just a statistic like that says, holy crap. Now, if you're a local mom and pop restaurant, if you're a small hotel chain and people find out that they stayed at your hotel and got, their credit card information stolen, if I was a decision maker and say, a company travel policy, I would say never again. We are never staying at that place again. And I don't care. I've seen as reckless as just people making copies of credit itineraries and then faxing them and not blocking out the sensitive credit info. Yep. That would basically be like doing that at mass to all your customers. And
that gives me the chills just thinking of it.
And I think, because anyone that's ever had their identity stolen or had an identity mix up knows how painful it is to try to get it back. And I don't care if you have, I don't care if you have a third party service to help you or not. Getting that fixed is a huge investment of time and energy, and it's exhausting, and people don't want to have to deal with it. However, people do want to do transactions on the internet. So now we've got this blend of people being afraid of having their data stolen and people being afraid of having their sensitive data taken. But we also have an era where people want to do everything they can. Purchases, whether that's buying your Uber through your mobile app on your phone, one-click purchasing on Amazon, booking your hotels with numerous different apps. And we don't even read their security policies anymore. But what I will tell you, Ryan, is that if your company handles the data, doesn't keep it secure, and I don't care who you've hired in the background to do it, that's not going to matter. It's your company. If it's whoever the person does business with. Do you agree with that? It's whoever it's the restaurant you buy from. It's the store you shopped at, the hotel you stayed at. That's going to be the place you're going to hold it against if if your data gets stolen, even if they've hired third parties to manage it.
Yeah, I'm not doing business with you to then also have to do business with everyone that you're doing business with. I hire you, or I spend money with your company you're my single, I always say one throat to choke, right? You're my single point of contact. And I think that's a big part. And, a couple of the live comments were coming through about encryption. And then, even about, if you're telling your customers that they might need LifeLock, it might be too late. And I couldn't agree more there. And I think in this world now, more so than ever, I think trust is extremely hard to gain. It's always been easy to lose. I think it's extremely hard to gain, especially at scale right now. And I can see businesses. I would almost want a recall of, well, I wouldn't say exploding Samsung phones, but let's just say phones that had a massive recall, I would almost take that, where it's a internal quality control issue, than I would of Samsung all of a sudden breaching every single person's contact book of all Samsung phone users, right? Like, if you think about it on the scale side, most people are like, well, the amount that it happens to the bottom line initially on a product recall is crushing, right? Like, that's, no one would want that. But ultimately, the repercussions are, we kind of trust Samsung now because A, they're not going to want to do it again, and B, they did put a massive recall into place. And so they didn't really lose trust. They more of like made us question, like, wow, are any of our other phones going to explode? But I mean, what are your thoughts there on like the prioritization of customer data security compared to some of the other things that I think sometimes get more attention for security, but probably have lesser ultimate long-term risk?
Well, I think it's prioritization of security in general is the problem. Like, when you talk to people about their tech priorities, they tend to talk a lot about the customer transformation, right? So in the digital transformation space, I've sort of identified that there's three transformations that companies are going through. There's the actual, cultural, transformation. That's the experience part of the transformation, how technology is being leveraged to create new experiences for customers and employees, right? And then there's the operational transformation that's going on. And that's how the technology within the organization is being put into place to better run your businesses and operations. Okay. But then there's a third transformation that people don't talk as much about, and that's the security transformation. So we spend a lot of time talking about how we're going to help create new customer experiences, how we're going to create new cultures and then keep employees happy. We talk a lot about how new technology can make the workplace cooler, funner, faster, more efficient. But we don't talk enough. We don't talk enough about how we're going to secure all this and everything that goes on, right? Whether that's the shadow IT growth. So a lot of us, people like you and me, Brian, we're huge evangelists for shadow IT. Let people download the apps, use the apps, be most efficient with the apps. But even if you think about how much we've talked about shadow IT, how much have we talked about security implications of shadow IT as a percentage of the discussions we've had here on the show? And the fact is, we don't talk a lot about it because we tend to spend more energy talking about how all the upside of it, the upside of allowing employees to be efficient, allowing employees to fail fast, to try things, to utilize new platforms, to become evangelists for technologies that can make their companies more efficient. But what we don't say is, hey, all that sensitive customer data that we're now putting in a third-party environment that isn't being managed or manned or even necessarily watched over by centralized IT, how is that all being secured? And how are we making sure that that's not falling into the hands of somebody who could do something harmful with it?
No, yeah, and I think the interesting thing there as well, and some of the people that are watching live right now are making kind of comments of like, I don't even think people are thinking that or thinking what layer it is. I mean, let's face it, the mobile phone, it's not Apple's job to secure the data on the mobile phone. It's whatever app is pulling that data. But we also want to our apps to share data amongst themselves, right? Like, I love that Uber pulls my Spotify data into the Uber app and prompts me, for my driver to play my favorite Spotify list. But how do I know that they're actually securing my user credentials across, app from Spotify app to Uber? And then this is another one. Are they securing it when they're locally storing it in the Uber app? Because we know kind of this world of caching and open source. One of the things that I think a lot of shortcuts are being made, especially in the mobile space, is the securing of data locally, either on an individual device or locally on a individual account for an app. That's a scary thing. I mean, it's the reason we can switch this weirdly into social media for a second. I mean, Snapchat, it has never been fully secure of the data or your nudie pictures because it actually does live on a server at some point. Yet Cyberdust, which is the one that Mark Cuban actually, the app that Mark Cuban created, it was never the conversations, the data, and the communications of pictures were never secured physically on an individual server. Therefore, that's why his pitch was, this is a much more secure solution because anyone you don't have the pictures disappear in 30 seconds, but if someone doesn't look at them for 24 hours, that's 23 hours and 59 minutes that someone could access the server that it's resting on and pull that customer data.
Yeah, it is very interesting. And then what you mentioned there is also interesting with all these app creators. And I know this kind of steers us away from some of these front edge and smaller businesses and data, but some of these app creators, like So we've been doing this Spark journey with Cisco, and you and I both we like Slack, and we've played with Google's chats and Skype. And one of the things I learned right away when I started working with Cisco Spark was how Cisco does the double encryption. But a lot of the apps, so when you're doing messaging, like Facebook is something that tons of us use, Facebook Messenger, tons of us probably share, personal, semi-personal information on Messenger. And that's how Facebook collects data, uses that for retargeting. I highly doubt that someone's sitting there reading your messages, but they are collecting all that data. And it's unencrypted data, meaning that basically you're sharing it, they're seeing your text and able to store your text, use your text, manage your text. And by the way, if the government ever wanted to investigate you, they could go to Facebook. Facebook could then hand them the transcripts of every chat session you've ever had, and they could read them over, et cetera, et cetera. So what Cisco's done is saying, hey, you're an enterprise. We sell to enterprises, and enterprises don't necessarily want some server or some cloud service that has all their data. So Slack's the same way, by the way, from what I understand. It's a single level of encryption.
It is.
And so that means that they can unencrypt and they can share all your files. So
and that's partially because and this is even a topic in the open API economy, where Slack gives you the single authentication, but they give you an open API to allow you to use things like 1Password and a lot of these other ones. And funny enough, I run the new the beta for Mac OS, and there was a new update for the beta Mac OS yesterday. And when it turned back on, the very first thing it did was just giant message, and it said, "Brian, your iCloud data has the ability to do multi-factor authentication. Do you want to enable it?" And the first thing I was like, sweet. Then I thought, uh-oh. When I log on to my Wi-Fi on an airplane, which that's not secure in the first place, and they need to ping my iPhone to prove that I am the person logging in, and my iPhone is not connected to Wi-Fi, Brian Fanzo has what I like to call a brick, a dead laptop, right? So therefore, even this two-factor authentication, when I was working with the government, we used actually proximity badges for our two-factor authentication. Therefore, you had to be sitting in front of your computer. As soon as you pulled your chair back even to talk to somebody, it would lock your machine. You had to have that side. But I think two-factor authentication is even one that is a little iffy. And then let's face it, that's users oftentimes. What about even non-authenticated customers? I mean, that's a whole nother idea, where a lot of times you don't even have to create a user account to buy something in the e-commerce anymore. They're like, just put in your user data, put in your address, put in your credit card. I actually always feel like that's less secure, because at least when they're putting it into my user account, like it gets stored with a unique identification number and it's attached to me, and they want to keep me happy because they want to upsell me later on. But when it's you're like, oh, just log in as guest, I'm like, yeah, they're selling that freaking data to every credit card company and Kenya scam artist that's ever existed. Yeah,
well, actually, it's great that you mentioned that and made all that point. And it was kind of where I was going at with that whole Spark situation. Is they basically said they want the company to have a second layer of encryption so that they can unencrypt something from their end, but that if the government wants to investigate your company, and again, most people have nothing to hide. They're all up to all honest Abe's, and it's not so much. It's just more about feeling like your trade secrets are secure.
Yep.
So it's not just government; it's just anyone wanted to hack you. But that's just an example with the government. Obviously, is that Cisco could say, "Sure, we will cooperate on our end, but you will have to go to the customer edge, the user, to get the rest of the encryption, unencryption done." I like that idea, because basically, if you're using messaging for business, so now you see Facebook at work coming out.
Yep.
You see Google's got all their chat. You've got Slack. You've got all these companies that have built these really, really attractive tools for collaboration, and they made it very easy and accessible for people. But nobody's thinking about what information is going over those chats and who actually can access that data and how it's being secured and stored. So that's a great example of sort of the security that goes along the data, is that once you hit send and it's there, you have no control of your data and what happens. So of course, that's more of an enterprise version versus the hotel and some of these small business versions. But as a whole, what's really going on now is we are constantly just firing off our information. And you and I talk about, nobody ever complains about too good of an experience.
Right.
But you can't rule out the security as part of the experience. So you can create this wonder, you can create like Uber. And I know Uber's in a big debate because of their political stances, but we all will agree that Uber has created a better experience for transportation, right? The ability to just push where you want to go, not worry about payment methods, walk outside, get in a car, get dropped off, get out of the car, don't worry about payment again, all that stuff that goes on. But if you found out your credit information was stolen,
my experience
Uber,
ends right there.
The experience ends right there.
It is over.
And that's why I said, like, Hilton can have the most comfortable beds on the planet, and Virgin America can have the best seats, or Emirates, or whoever it is, right? Could have the best seats on an airplane. And, you know, your local sushi shop could have the best, tuna roll ever. But if once you'd find out that your data has been violated, and I mean, specifically from a security standpoint, but as a whole, in this rush to personalize and to create these great marketing experiences, even just the unsolicited sell of our data that some people don't seem to understand, all that stuff as a whole adds up. It erodes trust. And once that trust has been eroded, it doesn't matter how great that edge experience, that transformative experience that we talked about with digital has been created, is that security creates that violation and people feel like they don't trust the brand. It doesn't matter how good the product or the service is.
You know, and this is interesting. So, our friends over at Adobe, and, Daniel, you and I are going to the Adobe Summit. We'll be doing some Smack Talk Live broadcasting there from the Adobe Summit in March. So our listeners, if you're going to Adobe Summit, come find us. If you're not going, we're going to bring you with us to that event. But Adobe has a Twitter chat every week, and Daniel and I usually participate. Daniel was participating, I believe, from the airport with a cocktail, since it was happy hour there this week for Adobe chat. But their topic this week was globalization, marketing globalization. And there was a weird part of me that went straight into the security conversation in my head, thinking about, okay, not only do we have trouble securing customer data locally and personalizing it and who's getting it where, but now these small, medium-sized businesses, they do have to realize they are global, really, no matter where you're located, because you're leveraging the power of digital to be your first impression. The internet is a global entity, but security and global practices, and let's face it, ethics, is a whole different world in a whole different bunch of countries, right? The idea of, where Snowden is at right now is an interesting one. I wasn't able to bring my government issued BlackBerry to about 20 different countries. To your point, Daniel, on the hotel industry, there was 3 countries, Bahrain was one of them, that I was not allowed to stay at hotels that had digital cards. They had to have actually physical keys like we have at our home, because of the lack of security practices of the data that is stored on your hotel room key. And a lot of these foreign countries, it was not trusted from our government entity. And I question, this was circa, I left that world in 2012. But this is one of those things that I think maybe it's even more interesting, because now it's funny. You can unlock your hotel room door with your smartphone. What's the transaction and security between the proximity of me badging into my door with my phone? What data does that have access to? Like, damn well we haven't read that USLA to understand what they're storing, but they could be pulling things like, is the username the same as the username on the hotel room? Well, are they pulling that from my contact book? Because now they have access to all of my contacts. Like, these are things I think at a customer data level, no matter what, you're the business, you're the one that's responsible for it. But we need to start thinking of it at these layers, because that one violation of your hotel room, every hotel room has a door. And if if it doesn't feel secure unlocking the hotel room door for your room, you're going to have a whole lot of vacancy.
Oh yeah, and of course, we've had that stuff happen. I mean, even remember that was it Aaron Andrews?
Yes. Aaron Andrews. Yes, the sports
from sport. I mean, and that wasn't even a data technology breach. That was just a lack of hotel paying attention to what was going on.
It was actually the number one security flaw, right? It's insider threat. It's the fact that the number one security flaw in all of companies is humans, and that was definitely what was violated on that one.
Yeah. So having a way to manage that and be predictive and be proactive. And it really probably comes down to a last thing, Brian, is, how does a company counteract all this? Because, I think we've identified here that whether you're a mom and pop or a large company, that the data breaches can be a massive problem for your company. And the statistics back that up. I mean, the data I shared with you guys about the 86%, and, almost every company that's had a data breach has seen a major fall off in value. I mean, Yahoo's sale value to Verizon has plummeted as a byproduct of their multiple data breaches that have gone on. And of course, like I said, if you're a small company, you can't afford to be sued. You cannot afford to be sued. in a class action lawsuit because you allowed your customer data to get breached. But what do you recommend? I mean, for small, mid-sized companies, because I think the big companies have the big boys. They have chief security officers. They've invested big in tech. They've got the consultants in there. It doesn't mean they're able to be perfect, but I think they are aware. But these small and mid-sized companies that were shaking their heads when I was talking to them, that saying, yeah, we really haven't thought too much about that. What do you recommend that they do? What do you think is a good starting point for them to get ahead of the game and start moving their security transformation forward?
Well, first thing that came to my mind is, we work in this space of, social media, digital marketing, technology, influencers, and there's a big press to understand better someone's expertise level. And I have a good friend, Bob Hayes, Dr. Bob Hayes, and actually Tim Crawford, who's listening to this as well, a CIO advisor. We were actually all on a panel at an IBM event a while back, and it was all about understanding the data scientist. And so I think the first answer for me, and actually I think I'll ping Bob, maybe get Bob on as a future guest of the show, from a data scientist, and his job for a lot of companies is trying to define what a data scientist is, what their role is in the company, and how many of them you need. And I think investing in data scientists to understand not only what data is available, but then having a data scientist that is clued in with your chief security officer, that is going through a prioritization and a risk management profile, right? I think I worked in the data center company, and a data center company, you have a thing where there's no such, the only 4-letter word is downtime, because you're not allowed to be down, not allowed to be down. And that means anything, right? Security was a huge priority for us. But one of the things that we really had to think about from, that side is not only where the data scientists or the security experts are sitting, but where do you put them into a new project when you're prioritizing? Let's say you're moving from Slack to Cisco Spark, and you're now saying, okay, Cisco Spark's going to require a little bit more data from us because they're going to do a little bit more security of our user logins. Are you integrating a data scientist and a chief security officer or a cybersecurity technician or developer to say, okay, although we're getting a more secure user space, now what data, what's the repercussions? Or what now do we have less to worry about where we could prioritize our security in other places? And I see a couple people doing the live show right now that are mentioning that they have some connections in the data science cyber space that they could be good guests. Ping us on Twitter. I would love to bring them on. And then one of our listeners on Facebook Live, actually one of my high school good friends, Marshall Handy, said, are we talking about the Cloudflare leak? And we are not. I'm not familiar with that, but that is one we will kind of look into and probably maybe talk about on a future episode. But I mean, what are your thoughts, Daniel? Where do you think they start? Because I think it has to be investing in both a data scientist as well as a cybersecurity engineer.
Yeah, I think that there's going to be a couple of different approaches. For most small and medium companies, they probably don't have the internal resources to do this on their own. So I think it's understanding, one is accepting the landscape that security cannot be an afterthought. So if you are collecting customer data, you need to own up to the fact that you need to secure that data. So that means, too, picking your partnerships very carefully. So as it pertains to every sort of experience touch point that you're looking to create for your customers, you have to ask that question about how are we securing this? How is this being secured? What precautions at the first and second and third levels are you putting into place to avoid, some sort of data breach? 3 is, probably if you don't have a full-time chief security CIO type that really is strong in security, is can you fractionally hire one? Can you bring one as a consultant? How are you bringing access to somebody who's looking over your shoulders, who has high-level knowledge and practical knowledge that can look at everything you're doing and saying, hey, are we taking the best practices? Someone that's going to review the guides from your third-party cloud providers, app developers, that's looking at the privacy agreements of tools that you're deploying throughout your company and saying, hey, okay, this stuff is good. This stuff is kosher. And then the 4th probably thing that I would consider is have a plan for when it goes bad. Because I don't care how much you're doing proactively, there are people out there that want it. And that's what they kind of say is if they want you bad enough, it really doesn't matter what you're doing, they're going to get you. So if a breach does take place, have the best tools and best people in place as possible to catch it early, but be prepared for how you are going to handle it, how you are going to communicate. It's kind of like a PR crisis in advance. This is one of those PR crises. Do not wait until there's a crisis to be ready for that crisis.
Without question. We used to call that an OSP. We always asked our clients, they had an OSP, and that's the oh shit plan. Right? Oh shit, our customer data has went out the wall. Like, what's our trust building? And for those that are listening, if this is something like, we had a previous guest on our show, Cody Cornell, someone that I worked with. He worked at he owned a company called Phoenix Data Security. He now owns a company called Swim Lane. And a lot of what he does is SecOps and consulting for businesses to, do, security assessment of your current platforms, of your current customer data, your e-commerce solutions. And so if this is an interest of you, feel free to ping the SMAC Talk handle on Twitter, or Daniel or I on Twitter. And if there's people we can get you in contact with, I think this is that much of a hot button piece. But Daniel, as we wrap up this episode, and I think I love the topic, and based on all the people that I have here, we're watching live. Apparently, it's resonate across the board. When we're moving forward, I like to think right now that we're moving into a more transparent world, thanks to really trust being completely violated by every company in the digital world, to the point where now you almost have to take a transparent approach in discussing what you don't know, exposing the things that you've screwed up in almost every aspect of your business, not just marketing. And with that being said, I'm curious from your standpoint, Daniel, as we move to a more transparent approach, open source, open API, collaboration tools, as well as collaboration between, your used to be just your partners, now collaborating with your competitors. Do you see a more transparent digital world over the next couple of years, meaning less worry about securing customer data or more?
I think it has to be more. I don't care how transparent you get with communications, with alignment. I think you can. I think you need to be using tools that are highly secure, because even if you are being transparent amongst small groups, you still need to make sure you're securing it to everybody that's outside of that particular bubble. So I think the design needs to be better. The layers of encryption need to be more well thought through, so that if you are talking like with Spark, how we can easily add people in from any domain and collaborate. So you at isocialfans.com, me at broadsuite.com, or futurum.xyz, whatever I'm at, we could chat. But we know that those communications are secure, even though they're coming off of a chat account set up on those domains. Being able to do that is good. So I do believe with transparency that companies will need to be more open about breaches, about what data they're taking from you. I do think we're going to see a proactive culture where we're going to be more upfront about what the most sensitive data information we are taking when you are signing up and registering for us. I think there will be a win for companies that stop kind of trying to bury it in 400-page long terms of service agreements. But as a whole, I still think that it's going to be very, very important that companies get better at this. I think it's only going to get bigger. And one other thing I wanted to mention before we kind of wrapped up was AI is going to have a massive effect on cybersecurity. I've already seen right now, Watson and IBM have been looking at how Watson can help with identifying cybersecurity. So you mentioned a data scientist. I actually think AI plus a data scientist is going to be, because the AI is going to be the data analyst of the future. It's going to be the one that's actually able to pull in all the data. The scientist will have a little bit of longevity beyond AI because of how they can contextualize data for humans, which in time, I think that might be at risk as well. But
exactly.
But as a whole, I think AI is going to move cybersecurity forward. It's also going to move hacking forward, though. I said that I think the implications are is if we can use it to better secure, I'm sure the hackers can figure it as a way to better intrude. And so as this all takes place, it's going to just be one more level, one more layer of push. And I think companies are going to have to get ready and prepared for an as-a-service approach to security, that they're going to need to be spending, certain hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of dollars per month on AI-based cybersecurity that's going to basically be the best chance they have to protect. Because once the AI is unleashed from an intrusion side, they're going to be able to very quickly see who's secure and who's not, and where they want to spend their time trying to penetrate websites. And so I think the key is going to be to get more on top of it and be more ready and start to budget and plan to invest in security, just like you do in customer experience, culture, social media, and even employee tools that are used to improve business operations.
I couldn't agree more. And thanks everybody that was watching live. Those that are listening on the podcast side, tweet us out there if this is a topic that you want us to go more in depth on. I've pinged actually in the Facebook Live comment section. I pinged a couple of my really good friends that are way more deeper level of security, more in touch with what's going on today, including a couple friends that are with Booz Allen Hamilton, a big government contractor, Microsoft, which I had to ping him about a Skype issue I had this week with my LinkedIn data all of a sudden leaking into my Skype account, which maybe we'll talk about that on the show that he comes on. But if this is something that you're interested in and want us to take a deeper dive in, we both love talking about it, but we are also not afraid to admit that there are other experts and different levels of people that we would be happy to bring on to the show and kind of extend this conversation even beyond. So that includes those that are listening right now. Feel free to let us know that side. So Daniel Newman, great show, great topic. You survived jet lag. For those that aren't watching, he looked as bald and three stripes as normal. So I think we are good to go. I hope you have a wonderful weekend with your little man back with the family. And then next week, I think we're both home next week. And then I'll be heading off to South by Southwest, where I think we'll do a couple episodes while I'm there at South by. So if you are attending South by or going to South by, make sure to ping me and let's connect. But awesome show, Daniel. I missed you. And we will be back next week.
Adios. I got nothing more to say.
Cheers.